Niranjan. I'm an independent threat researcher right now. I work with Microsoft, Symantec, Microsoft, and Sentinel-1 in my previous years. Today we will be speaking more about actual ransomware threat investigations where as part of this investigation works. I'll give you an angle from incident response, threat hunting and threat intelligence insights on how you actually dwell into a real ransomware case. What do you look for? How do you attribute a real ransomware attack and so on. We'll be also talking about reverse engineering nodes where we will look on ways how we identify code reusage and so on. Just setting one more expectation that ransomware execution happens at the last stage. So you will actually have a loader that facilitates ransomware execution once it is staged in an environment. So I'll also be covering on the loader part. Alright, so speaking of agenda, we'll talk about some of the top ransomware groups seen in the last 18 months. We'll talk about how we identified some initial access brokers hands-on works that has facilitated in real active breaches in global organizations. We discovered about 2 0 days during this course. I'll also give you a hint about how some hypothetical threat hunting queries has helped us identify one of those 0 days. We'll walk through a couple of malicious loaders that got developed during this period of time. As I said, there will be some connecting dots from the nodes that we developed from reverse engineering. Now, the data set that we actually leveraged were from telemetry data of different media products that I have worked with in the past. We also connected and collected some information from open source intelligence. We built a thorough, well-grown knowledge base, on top of which we built a huge stack of threat hunting queries that kept growing. We kept tweaking these existing queries as and when we saw some modifications done by threat actors so that we could detect the latest changes by these guys. Some of these queries were high fidelity, some were low, some were heuristic based. The biggest challenge we had was the cost of executing these queries in the back end, as you all face in your day-to-day life. I acted as a bridge between people, MDR, and threat hunting team, thereby pivoting to those nodes that this team built. I was able to help them understand what they were dealing with. I'll give you a lot of examples in the next couple of minutes how we did that. During this course, we identified some detection misses, where we notified these misses to the R&D team and the detection engineering team, where they have to tweak the existing code to ensure that the product is able to detect these signals. We leveraged c0c0n and census during this time. Now, the key points, as I said, we looked for the investigation lead point. So, what launched the encryptor in some cases, what happened after staging this encryptor, and what has happened before that. So, you need to go through these timelines, connect the dots to understand the entire usage. Now, I spoke a lot, we'll go through examples going forward. I was the lead author of the Sentinel-1 annual virtual threat hunting report for the last 3 years. Here is a sample. I have leveraged all this information from samples available in VirusCodal for today's talk. I'll also give you a hint on some of these insights from this report because it's publicly available. When you get time, please download and go through it. It has a lot of my works. Now, we'll go back in time, 2023. You will see different ransomware groups have abused different vulnerabilities during this time. Some of these vulnerabilities being exploited are also being talked, I think yesterday or the day before, when Amazon was listed in a news saying that they were hit by MOVIT. You can see MOVIT vulnerability here. Clock ransomware, which is a Russian-based group, is known for its love for MFT or file transfer applications. So they have been targeting Go Anywhere, Papercut, MOVIT, and SysID vulnerabilities in the past. I've seen these signals in our past organization. Magnical, I have a slide for that. I have not worked on this particular group. Kaspersky has written a detailed report on this particular group exploiting this vulnerability. This particular group is Microsoft's name. They say that they have exploited MS Office vulnerability, and once there is a Microsoft Office vulnerability, a lot of threat groups start to get hands on to that, and it's very difficult to track the vast majority of attacks that happens. This image is taken from a field, by the way, so it's easy to find. It's from here. It correlates between different groups and different vulnerabilities exploited by these groups. If you look down, you have Logbit, Akira. I heard a gentleman talking about Akira, we'll talk about that more. We had identified a 0-day with Cisco ASA without MFA. That bug was reported to Cisco and so on. We'll cover that in the next couple of slides. NeoEscape is a ransomware group which is not widely known, but it happened to be a successor of a 2017 ransomware group, and so on. So your take from this slide should be that yeah, there are a lot of ransomware groups out there. They are well known to target different vulnerabilities, and going forward we'll walk one by one on how we actually identify these groups, what vulnerabilities did they exploit, and how did we identify. First case study. SolarWinds Survey FTP vulnerability from 2021 identified to be exploited by clock ransomware during my days with SentinelOne. Microsoft blogged about this, stating that they had evidence of a Chinese group exploiting this 0-day. Now, please review this timeline. On 9th July 2021, SolarWinds published an advisory stating that their FTP application version 15.2.3 was susceptible to a RC, remote code execution vulnerability. On the same day, we built hunting queries. Trust me, sometimes building hunting queries can be easy, sometimes it might be out of your scope based on the technology you work for. Since it was an RC, it was kind of easy for us to build back then because it was an EDR engine and I'm looking for an RC exploit. Meaning, all I had to do was look for any child process that gets spawned from SolarWinds FTP application. Like, look for child process, could be CMD, PowerShell, and so on. This was a simple hypothetical query that we built. c0c0n published an advisory on 13th of July, 4 days from the initial advisory from SolarWinds, stating that they had evidence of a limited targeted attack originating from this 0-day. Microsoft blog came on the same day stating Chinese threat group was exploiting it. When I was reading the log, teaming up with the APR, on August we saw an attack happening and the agent was blocking all by itself because this hypothetical query was running in the backend, collecting all the necessary logs and data, helping the agent to train. The training helped in identifying and blocking this attack without any human intervention, meaning it was an autonomous engine blocking the attack all by itself. The story was reported to customers. I spoke in a webinar podcast in the month of August 2021, highlighting the different TTPs identified in this attack. How did we attribute that to clock ransomware? That's because the final payload was graced by a rat. This remote administration tool is well known to be tied to clock ransomware group. The same story was blogged by CrowdStrike in the month of October 2021. So this is how we identify and build stories. It starts with an investigation point, or you may have to build a hypothetical query to find an investigation lead. Next story on Akira. So, Akira ransomware group, I think it was first seen in the wild in the month of March or August 2023, and FBI said like they have hit more than 250 victims, earned about $42 million and so on. You can see the hints there. Akira ransomware group targets Cisco VPN to breach organizations. The third block that we see is from Building Computer. This was a report that we shared with them. Then we also found some traces about Akira abusing, Cisco VPN. Now, the story was built this way. When we were engaged with 12 IR cases, we knew it was Akira based on the ransom note and the binary we were able to collect, which was the encryptor. But we had no clue how these guys got into the organization. That's because of the lack of visibility. Our EDR logs were pulled from those endpoints where our EDR was installed. There was another huge volume of endpoints in the organization that didn't have our EDR product there. So you can find, you see the delta there, right? Attackers were actually laterally moving from that gap to our EDR protected machines. The moment it was laterally moving to our EDR protected machine, the attacker blocked the there, which was the binary or the encryptor itself. So we didn't know what was happening there. When we asked for further details with customers, they were not revealing any details. But one thing stood out. We started checking Shodan, and there were some IPs that we were able to collect. Shodan actually gave us hints about Cisco VPN trades, and that's how we reported to Breaking Computer saying that the organizations that were getting hit by Akira during that timeline had some product related to Cisco VPN. Then when we started speaking with customers, gaining trust so that we could install our India products to more endpoints in their environment, we found more traces and evidences of Cisco VPN without the MFA being installed in their environment. And then we discussed with Cisco and they wrote a blog about this. 2 CDIDs were assigned to that particular vulnerability. That's how that story got built. Now we have the binary, Akira encryptor. You need to know who you are dealing with. As I said, this particular Akira ransomware first came out, I think in March or August 2023, and we had got no clue initially, like, is it a rebrand of an old ransomware group? So typically, I reverse malwares, so I checked the code. Clearly, it was evident that large chunk of codes were shared from Conti ransomware, which was kind of active, I think in 2020 and 2021 during the time of COVID. Conti ransomware is well known for hitting the biggest organizations in the US, causing a lot of damages. And when you actually look into the transaction side from the blockchain perspective, you could actually see there are some overlaps there. This was taken from another research paper. Now that added more justification to our rebranding story, that it is kind of the same hands that was possibly responsible for Akira's development for Conti, because money is getting transferred through the same chain, and you see huge amount of code being reused. So now you know the enemy that you are dealing with. With our past experience from Conti investigations, now you would advise your organizations or customers that Conti is still active, or a rebranded form of Conti, which is Akira, is active out there. And here are the other key chains that you should be looking for. Advise your security threat hunters and advisors. That is how we communicate. So during this time, there was a tweet coming out from somebody named Aura. He says that Cisco VPN, no MFA, you will get hit. That's all he says. He didn't give any further hints. The image on the right side was from us that we shared with Building Computer. That was a string that stood out common when you review for certain brute force origin IPs from Shodan. If you just Google that string, you will see something related to Cisco. That is how we started finding the hit of Cisco VPN without MFA being exploited by Akira. This is the link that tells more story from our team. Now, as time gone by, Akira started shifting their infection vectors. From Cisco, they started targeting Juniper, then they moved to Sonic Wall, they also started targeting vulnerability with Veeam. It's kind of typical. These guys have made huge amount of money, and they were kind of active. They were not getting collapsed, or they were not getting arrested by any federal agents. So they proliferated, they grew over the period of time. And that's why they started targeting different vulnerabilities. This is how the Shodan page looks like. You look for the hit that you get from the brute force or an IP. It can give you a hit that it's Sonic Wall or Juniper. The detail on the left side actually gives you a typical Akira infection kill chain. It's not very fancy. The infection vector or the initial access is the biggest challenge tied to this particular group. Once they are in the network, they don't do anything fancy as such. You can see like they use advanced IP scanner for recon. It's not a difficult tool to spot. For persistence, they would create new user accounts. Fine. They leverage AnyDesk a lot. So you see any new AnyDesk getting installed on your network. Once there is a ransomware related discussion, please be on the lookout for Akira. For remote access, it is again AnyDesk. They also modified the registry for RDP value via firewall route. For data exfiltration, WinRAR was commonly used. We also identified Rust Desk. This is a cross-platform tool that works on Linux, Windows, or Mac. For Akira, they used Rust Desk for data exfiltration. So these are the tips and bits that you collect as you learn through different ransomware investigation. And you need to build hunting queries related to that. The obvious question would come like, why do I need to build a hunting query for legitimate tools like Anydesk or WinRAR and so on, please add the arguments that follow this legitimate application, like, for WinRAR, encrypting files within these many seconds could be a TTP that you should look for. Do not just look for WinRAR, hash or WinRAR metadata through your telemetry. That won't make any sense. Over the period of time, this was captured again in our annual report. These are like the top off-the-shelf tools that these ransomware groups used. As I said, it's a heavy investment if you would need to build hunting queries for these tools. They are legitimate, they would produce a lot of noise. The context behind these tools and why you suspect something to be bad takes time. So you would need a designated hunter to look for this context if you see this. So it's a huge list, I know, but if you look for the tools and names under defensivation, those are kind of work in this area, like Process Hacker and the sys file that gets dropped by Process Hacker, or ISWAT, Gmer, Terminator. These are like typically used for killing security services. BYOD or vulnerable drivers, again, look for them. So there are standard hashes which should not be there. So if you see or find it in your environment, spend some more time on that particular endpoint. Now, we'll move to the reverse engineering side. So people who are fond of reverse engineering might find it more interesting in the next couple of slides. I also want to help you understand that the next couple of slides will have stories again on ransomware investigations. Magnibus, first seen somewhere around 2021, and this happened to be a rebrand from an older one called Server 2017. So on a fine day in the year 2021, we were hit by Magnibus. We didn't know how did these guys get into the organization. So so you work for an area product, you have hundreds and hundreds of customers, but only one customer gets hit. Now that becomes more challenging, like why are other customers not getting hit by the same Magnibus on that particular week or a month? Can be a question that comes to your mind. So customer was not happy. We started looking into the endpoint. We had no clue. All we saw was a DNS request going out with some weird looking URL or something like this. The one that kind of blurry. Like Tor browser URLs. So interestingly, you query for this URLs or domains from in virus total, it gave hint that it's related to Magnibus. No customer is going to be just happy that they got to know that they were hit by Magnibus. As an IR company, you need to block, prevent, and give some recommendations at this point of time. We also need to help them understand what was the entry vector in that case. So we pulled up the agent logs. We studied more. We looked into the process kill chain. You can see that it was from IE Explorer. Not a lot of good organizations typically rely on IE Explorer, even in 2021. That was my assumption, by the way. But I have no clue that there were organizations, especially down South Korea and those regions, they were fond of Internet Explorer for quite a long time. So when we looked into the process tree, you could see IE Explorer spawning run DLL32, and then there was some exe that gets spawned. So we knew that IE Explorer is running in the backend, it's not spawning anything like a browser window in the front. So that itself was suspicious. So we didn't know if that version of Internet Explorer was vulnerable. And then as we wanted more evidence to let customers know, when we pulled in the agent logs, that matched with this process tree. So we knew for sure that IE was bad, they were doing something bad. Attackers knew about this IE browsers loved for this, by this customer, and that's exactly why they leveraged this zero-day in their environment. 2 CD IDs were assigned again, and there's a stat counter. I never knew about this page before, but they said 1.15% of the global page views are still from IE back in 2021. I didn't know that. I thought Chrome was most loved. And then you can see about 150 million page views were made from Internet Explorer according to the stats. That's when we learned something new there, this also could be an entry vector for attackers. Now let's talk about how we identify rebrand. Sometimes identifying rebrand is quite easy. If you look at those two images, one was from server, another one was Magnifier. The wordings, the font, the relative sizes are kind of same, and so on. There's nothing fancy. You can clearly make probably 40-50% match between these strings and the look of the pages. So this was an easy one, at least from understanding the rebranding story side. Again, you probably might have read about Links. Links ransomware group in July 2024 was when it was first seen. There was INC ransomware first seen in August 2023. Your story needs more evidence when you talk about rebranding. You cannot just rely on the strings between two different files and say that that's a possible rebrand. There was an advertisement or a post found in Underground Forum where somebody says he has the source code, he's going to sell it, and he's going to sell it under the name of ISC. So we had that post around the same time frame, like August. That's April 2024. Somebody has started using it for real world attacks. And that's when the first instance of Links ransomware was seen. We compared that because I had Yara rules written for Links that was hitting a new file. I had a Yara rule written for INC that was hitting on a new file in Microsoft. And then I compared the strings and connected with the Underground Forum post. I can clearly understand that's a rebrand scene. And then there were a few other media journals like Building Computer and a few others stating the same thing. Here is another rebrand story of S-File and Mindware. S-File has been out there from 2018 to 2021, I think. And Mindware was first seen in 2021. The names come from the strings in the binary itself. That's how you rebrand, that's how you give a name for a ransomware encryptor. So, as always, you compare these two binaries. There was a huge chunk of code that was kind of similar. That's kind of a generic one, if you see. That's a PEB table looking for export address table, and then it would enumerate and get the necessary functions from kernel32 and many other dealers and so on. But this was just one part of the block code that exactly matched between these two ransomware families. The other similarities, as I said, you need additional points if you are going to come up with a proposal of ransomware rebrand. Similarly, in ransomware nodes, they looked exactly the same except the name there were different, as S-File and Mindware. Similar victimologies, both were used to target mechanical companies and automobile industries. Both used reflective DLL injections. You could see the string there. It doesn't need a loader to inject malicious code into the process. Similar files and folders were selected and skipped. As you know, every ransomware would target only specific file extensions. We saw that similarity in these two variants. Shared drives were targeted, meaning if you had a USB or any drive mounted, they would start encrypting files there as well. And the arguments taken by both the ransomware families were the same. You see that there are additional points that we look into when we identify a possible rebrand. This is my blog back then, and I wrote down this rebranding story. Abaddon and No Escape. This might be very interesting. Abaddon was one of the most notorious groups back then in 2021, and people assumed that this group perished or vanished after a couple of years. Any other researcher would write Yara rules. Trust me, Yara rules on file content is not effective. It can be a file could get a packer on top, or it can be RAM, and then your Yara rule would obviously fail. Luckily, the first version of No Escape that came in 2023 was not packed. So my Yara rule, which was on unpacked version of Abaddon, had the same strings in 2023's No Escape. And that's how I found the first binary. You execute the binary, any ransomware, it brings up the log string, right? It said No Escape and so on. Anybody could name anything, so it was not a big story back then. We didn't have no escape signals from our telemetry data, so we could not build any story. My notes on this rebrand story was just like a scrap note, it was there at the side. And then came a time when we were looking into a ransomware attack against a hospital in the US. One thing stood up, the first interesting point was like the group was disabling Cisco Duo, simple registry setting modification done, Cisco Duo got disabled. And we didn't know who was doing it till the ransomware payload gets staged. So we waited, we were building trust, we wanted more logs and files from customer side. That's when we got the first sample of no escape from customer's environment. That matched with the ERR rule. We were very sure that it was no escape. Now the story built from my scratch note saying that, okay, we knew that there is a new ransomware out there with the name no escape, using the same strings as Abaddon. We have the ERR rules matched. That's a config file string. Initially, I knew about Abaddon, but I was not very sure about no escape. It confirmed that they were using the same config file structure. You can see the kill service function, kill process, not underscore text. That's the ransomware node. Add to auto run, print node, set wallpaper, the ransom node, and so on. See that that's a config file. Every ransomware payload would have a config file. The config matched between no escape and Abaddon, and that's how the story of this rebranding story was pulled. Then it was blocked by Blinking Computer again after 3 months. One point I want to say, see, every ransomware group, when they target an organization, they will go behind specific file types. Since this was hitting a hospital, they were going behind file types and folders by the names like death, NDA, insurance, and so on. So, nothing fancy, but just giving you additional context. For this is a group well known to hit multiple organizations within India, Malex Ransomware. Name is not fancy though, but according to my detail saying, this group has been successful in hitting many organizations. They abused SQL Server, that's it. And they would spawn cmd.exe and start launching PowerShells and bash scripts. In some cases, we found Purple Fox rootkit was used for persistence. In one instance, we saw XMRig miner drop for additional monetizing. Here's a timeline. Okay, again, this is another case where it got rebranded. Malex was initially found using a name called Fargo back in 2022. They got rebranded to Malex in 2023. They continued to exploit MS SQL for a long time. Unit 42 blogged about that in July 2023 when they saw a spike in activity tied to this group. Here, now this group is not very sophisticated and you will know why. Once you start learning about a group for a very long time and if the group is using the same file name, that's lame, that's bad from their side. That's how we were able to block an attack at a very initial stage. You see, those were the file names that they started using for a period of time, like updt.ps1, tzt.exe. They kept using this for more than one attack. And they were continuously targeting MS SQL. They would kill any process or service related to MS SQL by dropping a batch file and executing it. All these TTPs kept remaining the same. Yet they were successful. Some media products missed it. So it was easy for us to build a query. Let's just build a query based on the file name itself. Now, speaking about different ransomware stories, rebranding, this is the most difficult part. As I said, ransomware gets staged and executed at the last stage of a kill chain. But what happens before that is a malware loader. The loader is, they keep constantly evolving, they get sold, they get programmatically updated, they get exchanged between hands. Different affiliates would buy it, use it, sell it, and they vanish. Affiliates get hired between different ransomware groups. That's when they share some common traits that will build our rebranding stories. Loaders, they help in executing this ransomware ransomware payloads. And they don't stop there. They also help in defense evasion, credential theft, download additional malware. They come packed with new code every time. That's the complexity of handling or monitoring these loaders. And once loaders get dropped on your machine, it becomes difficult for you to block a ransomware attack. People don't write that way in a blog. I'm being very honest. This is the most difficult part. If you can block this, so we say like phishing attacks help in serving ransomware, right? Phishing starts at the initial stage. A loader is one that gets dropped after phishing, like a quackbot or squirrel raffle and so on. It is these loaders that help facilitate the next stages of attack. Detecting loaders is the biggest challenge for EDRs or AV engines out there. Here is an evidence I will show you. Squirrel raffle, which I blogged about, I showed you before. In the month of November 2021, helped serve quackbot. Squirrel raffle came through an email attachment that served quackbot. After a couple of minutes, quackbot led to Conti ransomware. This happened in November 2021. And in Conti infection, you can see these files getting dropped. You see that there are DLLs, those are the payloads. There's a misunderstanding that ransomwares are executables that you double click it executes. They come also in the form of PowerShell scripts, they also come in the form of DLLs, and as I said, the loaders will help execute these DLLs. These are the actual encryptors. Now, July 2021, there was another quackbot infection that we saw that led to another ransomware family called dark side ransomware. Those are the different files that got dropped. Different file name this time, but if you see the batch file, PowerShell script, COBOL file being used, you see there are similar files in these two attacks. This is what I'll tell about how threat intelligence helps. You need to keep enriching your knowledge base, you need to connect these dots, only then you will know who you are dealing with and what to look out for. Now that attack in July 2021 helped us understand to look for additional files in the month of November 2021 because the file names matched. We knew that COBOL strike was dropped in a similar fashion, so we started looking for COBOL strike in the month of November 2021. So that was my talk again from Squirrel. It was related to Squirrel raffle, which I wrote another malware loader. And the reason why this surged was because quackbot was slowing down. This is how attackers rotate their loaders. When something falls, or if they feel like the federal agents are taking down their infrastructure, they quickly jump onto the next loader. That's what they did here. And if you carefully see, right, the block of codes, the block of codes, if you see across these four malwares, Ancestor, Z-Loader, Squirrel Raffle, and Personal, they are kind of same. It's not very complex. It's a single byte XOR key there, XOR byte DL. And if you see above, there is a rotate ROR operation. So this chunk of code is happening at memory, meaning it's not happening at disk. So a loader that gets dropped helps facilitate downloading of additional malwares following some algorithms. So these algorithms are happening in memory, which makes it difficult for your static engines to detect. You cannot write a Java code to hunt based on this code, but we normally do because these attackers would test the detection capability of their payload by uploading their samples in the PySpark. And there are cases where we found detections from our Java as and when they upload. Typically, these files would have very less detection rates, but when they test it, we might understand that there is somebody who's testing some new payload, and this is how the code similarity will help us understand that we are dealing with a new loader. That is how the story of Squirrel Raffle was built. Handsetter Z-Loader, firstly it was using a same code block operation, single byte operation at memory level that matched the Squirrel Raffle. So we knew for sure that it's a new loader that we are dealing with. That is how the story was built. So next loader, quackbot was taken down. Attackers started shifting to two other loaders called Darkgate and IRAC. These were quickly adopted by 5 different info stealers, like within 2 months. That is when we spotted there were 2 variants of IRAC in the month of November. Quackbot infrastructure was again seen even after a huge takedown by FBI. I forgot the name, it was called as Operation Duck Hunt or something. But using JRM fingerprint, we were able to find new infrastructures getting popped up. but not significantly new backward loaders were seen in the wild. So attackers stick to IDAT at this point of time. We spotted the first two new variants of IDAT in November 2023. Elastic spotted the third version of IDAT, able to build its final payload from pixel, or like using steganography. We'll talk about that more. IDAT, we start seeing it from 2023. It was getting served from malvertised pages. The last variants were found through capture. These are like the common point, okay? The previous speaker was talking about JavaScript, malicious JavaScript, and so on. So this was spreading through malicious JavaScript as well. Initially, we thought it to be related to so-bullish malware, but it was not so. We started seeing different info stealers being brought by IDAT. Steganography was used. For people who don't know steganography, a shellcode or malicious program is embedded inside an image intentionally by an attacker and then used in an attack. That's called steganography. IDAT was also using API hashing. API hashing is not new. A lot of ransomware and malware use API hashing to hide the analyst from understanding what are the different APIs being used by the payload. So you would just see different text hash values in the binary. And during runtime, all the necessary APIs would get built. This was also using DLL search order hijacking, which means if there is a legitimate executable and a malicious DLL in a folder, it's intentionally blocked by the attackers, by the way. So if the legitimate exe is called, it would launch or load the malicious DLL from the current directory rather than from system32 or Windows directory. So that's called search order hijacking of DLLs. IDAT loader was also using process doppelganging, another trick, and Heaven's Gate. You see, a single loader is using all these techniques, and that's why I was telling you, encryptors or ransomwares which get staged and executed at the last stage of the kill chain is still okay. The loaders that facilitate a ransomware attack comes with high level of sophistication. You need to know all this to write queries. When you're a threat hunter, your EDR product should have detection logics for all this. Only then they will spawn alerts to help your security analyst understand what he or she is dealing with. So, the loader also had anti-sandbox technique, meaning it was intentionally calling delay functions so that if it gets executed and tested in a sandbox, it would not execute because it would delay its execution. That was the anti-sandbox technique used by that. It also had a killer module, meaning if there was any security processes running on the machine, it would try to kill it. A timeline again. So August 2023, we saw that dropping Luma stealer, queries were built, and then Rapid7 blogged about that after a week, saying that Luma steals set-top were seen dropped by IDAT. We started seeing Amadeo Vida Raccoon being dropped by IDAT loader or using IDAT loader. And that's when we saw two different variants of IDAT. I have an image in the next slide. More info stealers started adopting between December and January. Danabot and because Profit blogged about variant 1, like the first variant on 7th of February. Ours blogged about a story of an Australian government official hit by a malware that was using IDAT in July 2024. Now here comes the interesting part for a threat hunter. So I'll just take 2 moments. The recent times. Luma stealer is using IDAT in the recent months. Yes, please.
How it will be initiated, right?
What is the
So, you have mentioned that the C-bot will kill the process, right? Where some security measures are being taken. How it will like restart, or it will, how does that work?
It's for the running process of the machine. It's like some attacks. Yes, it will try to kill it. The anti-tampering process. Now we try to kill that. Yeah, we try to kill that. If the anti-tampering system is up to date, complex. Like, and this won't be successful. But that's a challenge.
I thought it was one.
No, it won't self-kill. It will not run if it's being executed inside a sandbox. So it will check for delay, it will intentionally keep calling delay function and it will try not to execute if it's inside a sandbox. But if it sees any researcher tools like IDAPRO, ODBG, Immunity Debugger, or security related services, it will try to kill it, knowing that it's a researcher's machine or there's a security service running on the machine. It won't kill itself.
So the load, you know that the loader will load some additional details if in case it is right?
Yeah.
So in that case, like, won't the antivirus be able to like catch those kinds of calls that are being external loaded?
That's the problem. These guys they would have already studied which antivirus or security product is in a machine before dropping these loaders.
They will tend to bypass that.
They will know the bypass. They will always keep a lookout for 0 days and bypass techniques sold in the underground forum, and they will drop a sys file or a driver file to kill that particular version of security product. Alright, so sorry about that. So here in the month of July, August 2024, that you see on the lower left side of the screen, this is where it becomes more challenging for threat hunter as well as for the area product. This is related to your question. Different process were chosen now because they knew, as IDAT was prevalent for close to about a year, they knew which process to inject into. It was explorer.exe and notepad.exe. So EDR products knew that if there is a particular key chain that ending with a process injection into explorer.exe under process double gammy IOA or alert, it should be IDAT loader. That's how threat hunter was interpreting. So they changed it to more.com as the target process into which they were injecting it into in the month of July to August. This is how they will change it, and they will intentionally change it to escape this detection logics by security vendors. Because the more strict detection engineering logic that gets into a product can slow down your machine. And that's how they keep changing the targeted process. And Elastic was talking about the config file that gets built from Pixel, relying on a different DLL. I have not analyzed that. They called it by the name Ghost Pulse. That was also targeting more.com process for double gammy process injection technique. Now, I know you guys are exhausted, but for your question, this is how much the kill chain of IDAT loader looks like. You have to go through every single stage to confirm this IDAT loader. Every single step needs to have an ADR alert. If not, we call it as false negative by the ADR product. ADR product goes through MITRE testing, and if there's something bad, they need to alert. If they miss any of this, it typically means that it's a negative score for the ADR product. Now, I don't want to take too much time, but there is variant 1 and variant 2. You see that attempt for anti-DLL book removal, ideally a ADR product would spawn an alert there because this malware would try to unhook the ADR product. The first variant would download the PNG file. I said that they leverage steganography. The PNG file holds the shellcode. It gets downloaded from a remote C2. That's variant 1. This variant 2 will actually have the PNG file in its R data section. It's embedded within the main binary. So that's like the first level or the easy clue for differentiating the first variant and second variant. Rest everything remains the same. There is a modular stamping, which means only the DLL, or only the text section of the selected DLL called mshtml.dll is where the malicious code gets injected into. They are so specific. They have an injector module, they have a loader module separately. So, and they also leverage Heaven's Gate, meaning they also leverage Heaven's Gate, which means if you have a 64-bit malicious file, that would launch CMD from sysball folder, meaning it's launching 32-bit instance and it's successful in injecting and launching cmd.exe because of Heaven's Gate technique. And it can happen vice versa as well, 32 into 64 bit. There's a selector value called 0x0033 and 0x0023. You'll see that in reverse engineering. The moment you see that with a syscall, you'll understand that Heaven's Gate technique. These guys are so sophisticated that they use all these techniques. This is the code I was telling you about. Variant 1 is on the left side, the first two blocks. Variant 2 is on the right side, two blocks. Variant 1 was seen used by Amade and Raccoon. Variant 2 loader of IDAC was used by Luma and Vida. You can see the huge chunk of small blocks, kind of similar between these two malwares, showing variant 1. These were small blocks used by variant 2 by Luma and Vida. Last, I won't take too much time. Scatter Spider, you guys must have heard of this name. They are well known to target telecoms, gaming industry, and various other industry techniques. This is one of the most notorious and threatening groups. They go behind people physically. That's because they rely on SIM swapping. They used to bribe telecom companies, employees buy SIMs registered under somebody's name or even their particular employee's name. Relied on MFA bombing. They used to continuously push notifications to employees as if it's coming from HR, finance, or IT to get MFA access. And people really talk about Scatter Spider. There are evidence that Scatter Spider was staff fraud, okay? And there are many other small groups that work very closely, and the entire group is called the COM. What makes it even more difficult to identify this group's TTP in your network is because they heavily rely on a lot of legitimate tools. NGROF, Screencast, Splashtop, different RMM tools. Very difficult to spot them, but they are also financially motivated because after some stage they would launch ransomware attacks. One thing kind of unique to this group is they use level.io. It's a remote monitoring tools system. That image is from FBI site, by the way. We work with FBI on this particular group. So you see level.io before staging of a ransomware in an environment. I won't say like it's 100% sure that it could be related to Spider, but please keep that in your mind that it could be likely, like with medium confidence, it can be related to this group. Again, if you see any domain impersonation with a hyphen sign in between, like something hyphen opta.com, something hyphen servicenow.com or so on, with level.io plus ransomware staging, you see there are some connecting dots. You can kind of feel that with medium confidence that it could be related to the one or the COM or Scatter Spider. Now, ransomware groups are well known to build their own data exfiltration tools. We not just rely on the custom tools. Logbit has advertised their Steelbit, that's the name by the way, of their data exfiltrator tool. They compared their speed, like the speed at which Steelbit would exfiltrate data with other known tools. R-Clone is an estimate tool, by the way, and they said like their tool can exfiltrate data much faster than open source tools out there. It's a known post, okay? It's kind of old, but I wanted to give you a reference to EXE Matter, which is a data exploitation tool known to be used by Black Matter and Black Cat. See the years 2021 and 2022. The first time we saw EXE Matter, it was in 2021. When we reviewed the code, we knew that this was a list of file extensions looked by that particular group. But in 2022, we also saw EXE Matter in another ransomware case. The ransomware node or ransom node had Black Cat name in 2022. So now comes the story. Am I seeing a rebrand about? So EXE Matter helped us understand that the tool underwent an update. You can see additional file extensions being targeted now in 2022. Something related to AutoCAD and engineering, drawing, app related files, right? So somebody has had access to the source code of this EXE Matter. He has modified it, and it gave us a hint that we are looking into another rebrand story from Black Matter to Black Cat. And that was later posted by Kaspersky in their research blog. In the blog, they said like Black Matter main basis. So our story or proposal was right. Sorry that I took a lot of time. Thank you so much. Have a great day. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'll be around. Thank you.